picture every time of my unprofessional attire, so he's got it's cataloged.
Saw Andrew today on the mall, coming from Fort Smith, and he was just dressed to the nines. I said, good gosh, you dress like that every day? No. But he only wanted to play baseball. Miller School baseball.
Oh, Joe. The PowerPoint's up there. I'm gonna go up there and I'll kind of start and I'll kick it to you.
Yeah.
Here and there. We do it out, kind of just
Yeah, perfect.
informal, kind of flow. Stuff.
Is it interactive outside of this room with questions?
Yeah, Mr. West Washington.
We have one of our members online.
And then folks that are watching can raise their hand on Zoom to
Okay.
ask a question. Did you see Kate Fraley's email, Bill?
Yes, it is.
I ran into her at Costco today, and she said she's gonna be on Zoom, but she had questions, but she would.
Because you're not gonna talk for 2 hours, are you?
I'll be done in about 30 minutes. I plan on being on the road here after that. Yeah, I wasn't gonna take questions.
The longer the better, because they have a training
I'll
report.
take
that they
questions
have to
from
meet.
PCOD, obviously, because I think that's appropriate.
Yeah, I didn't have a lot,
Yeah, I'll be managing the question so that
By the way,
For-
Mr.
for
Dillard has
relevance,
death in the
basically.
family. Bill,
Mhm.
Mr. Dillard's not coming because he has death in the family.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Hey, Karen.
Hey, guys.
Chairman,
So he's in Texas right now.
Oh, I think I'm fine, but I am not the most graceful, so I'm just being here.
By the way, that next Wednesday.
How are you?
I'm good.
Or next Thursday.
Everybody graduated from basic training?
Yes,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
he did finish AIT and he,
Oh, was it AIT?
yeah, he finished AIT.
You don't know sandwich?
I'm good, thank you.
Person last week and.
Oh, I should have told you he's getting kale salad.
Oh. Proud of you.
Yeah.
First time I met
Did
him,
O-
we had
OSAT,
lunch
which
and
is
I ordered like
Association Training, so.
what was it,
basic
mushroom
and then
risotto and
Steak.
Yeah.
scallops and stuff and
So he's.
kale salad.
He's
Like,
doing
A little scary.
We didn't
Yeah,
start off on the
training.
right
I
foot.
was like, I don't know, man.
it's joint training.
It did look good.
It was pretty good.
It looked pretty good.
Yeah.
He had like bacon and
Well,
walnuts and
dismount.
cheese. and I had more
Yeah,
calories.
Probably had more calories. Yeah. That's
He's,
probably true.
he's trained to drive the Bradley, but he wants to be the Bradley district. It's safer inside the vehicle.
Chief, when you go up.
The only place he's been
Can you
for
just
training
make
is
sure you
Benning.
hit the share?
Share, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. All of it was getting. Now he's,
I love that shirt. You got me in the mood.
Oh, yeah?
That's it. 'Cause I'm off tomorrow.
Good to see you.
After this, I'm going to Nova and I'm gonna be sitting by my pool tomorrow.
Oh, yeah?
I was just texting my wife.
Uh-huh.
Love that
Like
shirt.
training in Hawaii.
Yeah.
How you doing? Good to see
Hey.
you. Long time no see.
What's going on? Good to see you too.
Jane.
We were in your neighborhood the
I
other
was in
day.
Atlanta, that one was like, I was there for 24 hours.
Okay, just that one.
And, My son said, yeah, there was.
We swarm in.
Yeah, so now I might get arrested by my own son, right? How you doing?
Good to see
Good to see you, man. I want to hold up the whole meeting.
Cameron.
James Watson, nice to meet you, Cameron. Yeah, great to meet you. I guess I'll sit over here by myself.
are you in town for a while now? Okay.
I've only got like 2 or 3 more months on this board.
So then you can't be-
Morning in progress.
Oh, how you doing?
I believe as many people are going to come. You're just a couple of them.
Nice people, by the way.
I was up there today for, I went up last night after the Venable community meeting. And, cause we had a Special Olympics thing in Manassas, so we were up there for that. So I stayed up there last night. They came.
Figure out how it's like an hour and a half.
Less I had. Depends.
Almost an hour.
About 30 minutes ago.
Really?
Yeah, it's just west, I'm on the west end of Prince William. So it's like,
Okay,
yeah, about 30 minutes from Colville.
do you take, so you take
29 all the way up, jump on 28 and it's.
Okay, that makes sense. I guess I don't know the geography of Northern Virginia.
It can take, like, if I go up on a Friday after work, like at 4 or 5, it could take close to 2 hours.
But if you don't hit bad traffic, it's an hour.
Yeah, or like Bristow, like western Prince William County.
Oh, okay.
If you hit, the worst part of the drive, like, is getting out of Albemarle, is all the light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Once you get past
20
that,
miles, yeah.
because we still have a place in Prince William County. So if I go up there on a weekend or something, it's like, if I come back on a Monday morning at like 5 a.m., an hour and 15 minutes.
Driving speed limit.
I did, yeah, I don't need that news story. I'm good. I set my
Okay,
cruise
so,
control at 8 miles over.
So let
Write
us,
me a ticket for doing 8 miles over speed limit.
let us begin here.
Time.
Time is 6:34 by the clock. 6:33 by my phone. Call this meeting of the PCOB to order. I'd like to welcome our distinguished guests, including you, Chief.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate that.
Anyway, the first order of business is for us to have announcements. Anyone have any shout outs or information for the good of the community?
Just a reminder, Mr. Chair, about the Friday evening festival at Riverview Park.
The Region 10
Region 10
community
outreach.
outreach effort, 4 to 6 o'clock tomorrow.
We will be there.
We will have a table. Hopefully it won't rain on us too much. We'll distribute some swag and we'll tell people about Oversight. On that note, we also had a table at the Abundant Light Festival a couple of weeks ago. There are a few very unflattering pictures of me on Abundant Light's website. So anyway, so after that, let's see, approving our agenda. Does anyone have any comment, amendments, suggestions related to the agenda? Are there any objections to adopting the agenda as it stands?
None.
Hearing none, the agenda is adopted. And tonight's agenda basically features a presentation by 2 experts in the field of use of force, Chief Michael Kochis and Commonwealth's Attorney Joe Tania. We'll get to that as soon as we finish our other item of housekeeping, which is approving the minutes from our previous meeting. Does anyone have any comments, suggested amendments to the minutes that were circulated and posted by the executive director? Are there any objections to adopting the minutes? Hearing none, the minutes are adopted with thanks to the executive director. And just for the information of people who may be watching online, there will be a community comment period at the end of this meeting after the presentation. So now on to the main order of business, which is for us to hear about use of force, law, and procedures.
All right, I'm gonna stand up there, because that's where the PowerPoint is, so. All right. Wait, let me back up. I gotta share the screen, right?
You're shared.
Oh, I am shared.
Yep.
Great.
Chief, you're not sharing the screen.
I'm not sharing?
No.
Oh, no?
Okay.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Now I am, right?
Yep, that works.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you, and thank you to the board for inviting us to come talk about this really important topic that can be very complex and confusing. And so I really do thank my partner, Commonwealth Attorney Joe Patania over there, because I say this often, I am not an attorney, I don't pretend to be an attorney, and I'm not sure I'd want to be an attorney. There really is a lot of nuance when talking about use of force and the law and all the things around it. So we're gonna kind of, as we go through this presentation, kind of go back and forth on this, and Joe can clear up a lot of these things as well. So when we talk about use of force and how we, as a police department, look at whether a use of force is justified or not, there are two things that we look for, or that we look at, right? And I'm gonna try to lead us at a pretty high level. Number one, was the officer in the place that they were legally? Okay, that's the first thing we have to look at, and we'll explain what that means here in a minute. And the second is, was the use of force justified or reasonable, which is the word we use, reasonable within the confines of the law that dictates what is reasonable or not, and we'll get into that later on. So to talk about use of force, we really need to start with talking about what kind of police citizen encounters are out there. And by and large, for the most part, police citizen encounters really fall within three areas. And they are: one, a consensual encounter, two, an investigative detention, or three, an arrest. Okay. And the best way to really describe each one of these is we talk about a continuum of justification, all right? And so if you look at, and I'm gonna try to move these around so you can see some of this. Okay. If you think of this as a scale, all right, the very end of that scale where it talks about beyond a reasonable doubt conviction, that is a standard needed in a court of law to convict somebody of a crime. That is at the very end of that scale, okay? You see the middle's about 50%. If you're talking 100% at the very end, 0% at the very beginning. And so let's first talk about a consensual encounter. A consensual encounter is the very beginning of the scale. An officer needs absolutely nothing to walk up and talk to you. You also don't have to talk to them. You can walk away at any point. That's a consensual encounter. I can walk up to you, Bill, and say, hey, Bill, how are you doing today? And you can say, bye, and walk away. And that's fine. I don't need anything to come up and talk to you. That's what, just a person coming up and speaking. So there's no really legal requirement for me to come and just speak with you, okay? I'll get into it in 1 second. The second encounter is an investigative detention, right? Purpose of an investigative detention is to detain somebody in order to confirm or dispel your suspicion, an officer's suspicion, that a crime may or may not be afoot, all right? And so there is a standard that an officer needs to do that, and that standard is often referred to as reasonable articulable suspicion, all right? That within this scale, and I know Joe doesn't like to use percentages, but I'll get into it a little bit. Somewhere around 10 or 20% on this scale is where that kind of lands, all right? And then you have arrest. Probable cause is needed to place somebody under arrest. Probable cause is also needed to secure a search warrant for a phone, a home, a person, whatever the case may be, or obtain an arrest warrant on somebody. You'll notice probable cause is still below that 50% line there, all right? And so what you'll notice is it's a pretty low standard to charge somebody with a crime. Very high standard to convict somebody with a crime, right? So just because someone is arrested or charged with a crime, there's still a long way to go. And that's by design, Okay? And so the three encounters, that's where they stand on here. And I'm gonna turn it over to Joe, see if he has any comments, insights on this. I'm sure he does.
Yeah, am I able to just address people from here? Does that work? Yes, good, okay. So first of all, thanks to the chief for putting the PowerPoint together. I did no work on it. I did review it, but thanks. And I wanna thank the PCOB for having me here and the chief used an important term. He talked about our partnership and how we're teammates in this. And I think that in Charlottesville, the chief and I feel that to get this stuff right and to train people and to have, there be room for learning and improvement, it's gotta be teamwork between our office and the police department. And I feel we've got a really good solid foundation. The only thing I'll say on this is, and some of this is really hard because it's very technical stuff that happens in a courtroom. So a citizen could look at reasonable suspicion and be like, so you're saying police can just grab someone because they're suspicious of them doing something? And that's not, reasonable suspicion has a very precise and technical meaning in the law. It's reasonable, articulable suspicion of criminal activity. So what we tell patrol officers when we're training them and working with them, we're like, what code section are you suspicious of the person violating? And so it's not police officers just being able to go and grab people and have them in investigative detention because they're just plain old suspicious. And that's not how they're trained in the police department. That's not how they conduct themselves. That's not how they go about their job. So I guess I wanted to just put a little more, and again, these are very technical terms and the chief's given a very macro view of this, but I want to assure everyone that I'm suspicious so I can detain you. That's not how it works or how the officers are trained or how they act.
And to your point, that's a really good point, Joe. When we talk about reasonable, articulable suspicion, the officer has to be able to articulate a specific set of facts that led them to believe that either a vehicle or a person, that specific vehicle or that specific person is involved or may be involved in some type of criminal activity. So to Joe's point, it just can't be, hey, I think this is suspicious. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. And I bring up this next slide because a lot of what we do in our field and a lot of what Joe does in our field, in his field is set by precedent or court cases, right? And so there are several cases that kind of talk about what is reasonable suspicion, where did it come from? And it's important to understand these cases. And some of them may sound familiar. Terry v. Ohio is one that talked about stop and frisk and allowing officers to conduct limited searches for weapons if they have specific articulable facts that person, one may have committed a crime and two is armed. Where this gets confusing to a lot of folks, they talk about stop and frisk as one act. It's not. There are two different sets of standards that are needed to stop someone and then to frisk someone. Right, and frisk is a pat down of the outer garments of somebody. You're not going in their pockets or anything. It's a pat down of the outer garments, or if they're wearing a backpack, you could pat down a backpack. But it is always for weapons. You cannot pat somebody down for drugs or anything like that. It is always for weapons. And so there are two different standards, and even police officers sometimes get this confused. Joe, do you have any insight on that?
No, I'll let you keep going, maybe.
Okay. And then, so that's Terry v. Ohio. It's a very popular case that a lot of people talk about, just in the community. The second case that kind of talked about what reasonable suspicion is and the rights of officers to detain folks is, United States versus Sokolov. On that court, they held that officers can rely on a combination of factors which taken together can amount to reasonable suspicion. We like to talk about the totality of the circumstances. And we'll get into kind of some of the things that can mean. The other case is Alabama v. White, and that ruled that an anonymous tip may alone constitute reasonable suspicion to detain somebody if a subsequent investigation corroborates some of that information. Now, anonymous tips can be tricky. It depends how detailed that anonymous tip is. It depends what is corroborated. Like if I see a guy by the name of Bill wearing a blue shirt, gray shirt, just stole something out of a car and was walking down the street, and that person is known to me as an officer, that carries a different amount of weight than someone just calling in and said, Bill just stole something and you walk down the street. So anonymous tips are not all the same.
And then finally, Illinois v. Wardlow, this is a case that came out in 2000. And it's basically where the Supreme Court said a person's headlong flight at the sight of police is reasonable suspicion for the officer to chase and detain that person to confirm or dispel that they suspect a crime may be afoot. The key to this is headlong flight at the sight of police. So what is headlong flight? Well, it's not somebody just jogging down the road in a cop hat. That's not headlong flight. That's an officer driving around the corner, a person looks at them, stops, and takes off sprinting, running. That's headlong flight. Again, we're not at probable cause yet, we're at reasonable suspicion. And in that case, the Supreme Court said that officers can apprehend that person based on those facts. And there's other things. I want to say there was the location, neighborhood where it occurred as well in that case. Am I right, Joe?
Yeah, and I think the slide says it's a factor, so I
Yes,
think
it's
someone
one of
sees the
these.
cops and runs, that's
Not
probably not enough, and the slide says it's a factor. But it might be a shots fired call, police respond within 2 minutes, someone sees officer and runs, that might be enough.
Correct.
Can I go, I just wanna make one point,
Yeah, good.
could you go back one?
I can figure out how to do that.
Well, it was the Terry v. Ohio, and I wanna make a
Yeah.
point. First of all, I don't know what officers get in their training, but it's like, maybe a day or two of legal, it's not a whole lot. And so I've been doing this for 25 years, the chief's been doing it for a very long time. This is my personal opinion, it is not reasonable to expect patrol officers in their first 5 years to get this right all the time. I mean, that's just insanity in my personal opinion. So they might say, well, I had this person, I thought they might have had a gun, and they articulate why, and they're like, so I'm able to do a frisk, so I put my hand in their pocket to see if there was a gun. Well, that's not a pat down. That's an invasive search that requires a search warrant. But you get an officer that's 6 months out of the academy and they're not intentionally trying to violate someone's Fourth Amendment rights. They're like, okay, I've got to think through that a pat down is exterior only. And then if I can, touch something and feel on my training experience, it's got the outline of a revolver. So I guess I just want to emphasize and point out, and this is all happening, the chief and I were talking, this is happening very quickly, under maybe high stress, and 7 people around filming. So there's built in, I think, in the training with the police department, roll call trainings that our officers do, and when they bring cases to court that we see maybe someone put their hand in a pocket or a backpack when they shouldn't have. These are not on their own, in my opinion, Fourth Amendment constitutional violations, they are teaching moments. And if the officers are saying, okay, great, this is a learning experience, I know what I did, we immediately tell the defense attorney, probably tell the judge we're dismissing and why. I just want to make sure that it's important to me that these young men and women are newer to the job, men and women are, and from what I've seen, really trying their best. And there's mistakes built into some of this because it's really can be complex.
Absolutely. It's very complex. Yes, Bill.
Yeah, I just want to ask, before we get away from factors. You suggested that location could be a factor, neighborhood could be a factor. Can race be a factor? Can time of day be a factor?
Time of day could be a factor. Race cannot be a factor. Well, let me say this. If we know a suspect, if someone calls in and says an Asian male just robbed this person and they're running down Main Street, right? That's part of the piece of it, but race in and of itself cannot be a factor.
Quick question, or maybe to Joe as well. If someone is a frequent flyer, they've been through the system 3 or 4 times, had multiple convictions, is that sufficient to stop and frisk just to see that guy hanging out on the
No.
corner?
It is not.
You cannot.
Cannot.
Okay.
Yeah, well, you said neighborhood is one of the.
Yeah, so let me talk about that. So the courts continue to kind of, and it's becoming less and less. But Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, but the courts have kind of evolved and are moving more away from just the neighborhood or what we used to call high drug areas. Like, what's a high drug area? You could say I live in a high drug area. I mean, what does that mean, right? And so it depends, right? But I would say it's less and less a factor. And I think, were we talking about this the other day? I think we were talking about this maybe the other day, and just the courts have brought this up in the past, and they said that can be one factor. But in my opinion, it's probably less and less than it is today. I don't know, what do you think, Joe?
Yeah, I can't stand that case, but I mean, it's
It's a
the
Supreme
what the
Court
Supreme
case.
Court said,
It said neighborhood is a,
high crime area,
High
not
crime, okay,
neighborhood,
gotcha.
so, which is a very different thing, a
Right,
high
right.
crime area. I have rarely
Right.
seen in Charlottesville officers using, that, but the chiefs talked about hotspot policing, and so if there were 76 calls for shots fired in the last 6 months in this 3-block area, and there's increased kind of attention paid, I mean, I think that's smart policing, but that alone might just be where you're sort of paying attention because there's been so many calls. But I have not seen that really be something that's a factor. And when someone comes in and is aware of that case, we very quickly say, just,
move that.
Yeah.
yeah,
I can see scenarios where you have, we don't have a lot of this in Charlottesville, but like a concert, anywhere there's a high concentration, UVA corner even, late at night, 3 a.m. There's certain areas that may not be high crime, but you have a lot of intoxicated 20-year-old knuckleheads, like I used to be,
Uh-huh.
walking around the streets and,
Yeah,
not necessarily a neighborhood thing, but it's
gotta be
a
a
lot
high,
of things are happening.
it's gotta
right
be
there.
a high crime area, not neighborhood.
Right.
yeah. So probable cause, again, we're moving down that scale now, right? Much higher standard than reasonable suspicion. Probable cause is the standard needed to arrest somebody and charge them with a crime, okay? So these are the cases that kind of talk about that. Probable cause really relies on a practical, common sense decision that a crime is likely to have been committed. Another case, Illinois v. Gates, a lot of people in the law enforcement field are gonna talk about this, but this is, this is more of where the Supreme Court moved away from a more rigid test and emphasized a real flexible approach, considering all the circumstances, again, going back to the totality of the circumstances to get to that level of probable cause where someone could be charged with a crime. And then in 2003, Maryland v. Pringle talked about, they reiterated probable cause does not require the same level of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. As you could see on that scale, you have a long way to go before you get to that standard of convicting somebody. And that's why the system is what it is. That's the checks and balances into the system. Just because you were arrested and charged with a crime doesn't necessarily mean you're convicted. There's still a lot of work that has to be done. There are still checks and balances that have to kind of go through the court. So, Joe, anything on those?
No, sir.
And again, these are just the different definitions that in the area of probable cause that the courts have came down on. So
I'm just sorry, I don't want to
Yeah.
interrupt your flow again, but is there a distinction between arrest and detention?
yes,
I mean, we're talking about like Graham versus Connor,
we're gonna get to Graham v. Connor in a
Okay,
second.
fine.
Graham v. Connor talks about the reasonableness of use of force, right?
Okay.
So, but there is a distinction. A detention is like we talked about reasonable suspicion, right? Say that Wardlow case. Someone, fleeing a headlong flight, Joe's scenario where there was just a shooting, an officer pulls up shortly after, someone sees the police, takes off running. So that's reasonable suspicion to chase that person, then detain them. And then investigate further, is this person involved in what just happened, right? The courts don't expect officers just to turn a blind eye. You don't have enough to charge them necessarily with that crime, but you have enough to detain them and investigate further. And so that's a detention, right? All right, okay. So this is what you're talking about, the standard for Graham v. Connor. So we use what's called the reasonableness standard, and it came out in this case. And it basically defines it as the use of force by law enforcement officers is judged by an objective reasonableness standard. This means that the officer's actions are evaluated based on what a reasonable officer on the scene would have done without the benefit of hindsight. So what that means is, when I get a use of force or when Joe looks at something, we're Monday morning quarterbacking, we're on the sidelines, but when we look at it, we have to try to look at it through the eyes of the officer based on the information that officer had at the time that force was used. And was it reasonable at that time based on all the stuff the officer knew at the time? Not what we know now, what the officer knew at the time. And so that is the legal standard that is necessary when we are reviewing these cases. And so there's some things that you'll look at about what is reasonable when you talk about force, right? Every use of force could be just grabbing someone by the wrist and put them in handcuffs. It could be a fight. It could be dealing with someone with a knife. It could be involve a taser, whatever. Those are all uses of force. And so how do we determine what is reasonable? And there's a lot of things we look at. The severity of the crime at issue, right? So we're looking at that. Whether the suspect poses an immediate threat to safety to the officers or others. Whether the suspect is actively resisting arrest or attempting to evade arrest by flight. What did the officer know when they were responding to the scene? What did dispatch tell the officer when they're responding to the scene? Sometimes that information isn't accurate, but all of that stuff has to come into play when making a determination of whether what that force the officer used was reasonable or not. Joe, anything?
Yeah, I think I might get to this on a later slide, but you know, the criminal analysis is pretty atypical, but when it comes to us, I mean, if you think about it, every time a police officer touches another individual, that's an assault and battery. I mean, it's every single time an officer goes hands-on with somebody, it's a harmful or offensive touching, it's an assault and battery. But you have to remember that police are privileged to use force and to touch people during the conduct of their job. So first of all, they've got to, you know, have a valid privilege to be doing it. Meaning they have to have a legal basis and reason to be going hands-on with someone. And then again, you look at the reasonableness. So if someone's like, well, I've got a petty larceny warrant for you, and the person's like, okay, and they take their baton out and crack their head open. I mean, like that, we're gonna get that case and look at a felony assault. And so that's an extreme example. But again, you've got to say, do you enjoy a privilege to be putting your hands on somebody? And then if you do enjoy that privilege, which the officers almost always do, is it reasonable in light of the factors that the slide set forth?
Our policy talks about what we kind of just talked about here. So our policy says officers shall only use the amount of force that reasonably appears necessary given the facts and circumstances perceived by the officer at the time of the event to accomplish a legitimate law enforcement and objective purpose. So as Mr. Patania said, you know, there has to be a legal reason they're there and they're putting their hands on something.
And Chief, that if I'm the suspect and I'm getting in your face and giving you a lot of attitude and provoke you, I mean, obviously that's going to be a problem. I mean, I mean, what I'm alluding to there is the officers are expected to just completely be able to let that stuff roll off their back, which is in the heat of the moment. I mean, that's a pretty tall order.
It's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
So we're hiring 21-year-old kids, sending them to the police academy for 6 months, and we expect them to be perfect. And I'm going to show you some numbers here. We ain't perfect, but they're pretty close. And I'm going to show you some numbers here in a minute, but it's a lot, right? What we talk about, that whole continuum of justification about interactions with the public and detaining folks and what's probable cause, what's reasonable suspicion, where am I on that? And these officers have to make that decision in about 5 to 10 seconds.
And it's filled with
sometimes they don't
ambiguity.
get it
The
right.
standards are full with ambiguity. I mean, reasonable this, parts, some of this, some of that. I mean, you're not working with clear criteria.
It's not. And like I said, I'm not a lawyer. Joe's been doing it, and he teaches the law. Law is all like that. There's a lot of gray in it.
It's not as bad as psychology, but close.
Yeah.
I have a question, am I allowed to have a question?
What's that? We're gonna get through this. So,
Okay,
I
I guess not. All right.
want to talk about one of the things that we are rolling out here within the police department, when it comes to use of force. And it is a new way of looking at use of force. It's called ICAT training. ICAT stands for Integrated Communications Assessment and Tactics. This is something that the Police Executive Research Forum pushed out a few years ago. A lot of major cities are going to it. It's the new way of thinking about use of force in general. And it really focuses on communication skills, critical decision-making, tactical skills, scenario-based trainings. So we sent 2 of our officers out to a train-the-trainer class out in San Diego a few months ago. They are back. And we are rolling it out throughout our organization, throughout the entire organization. the best way to describe what this is, it's really, there's a lot that has to do with the mindset when it comes to use of force. And they talk in this training a lot about being able to differentiate the difference between what's a threat and what's threatening. Those are two different things, right? And so the scenario or the example I'll use is somebody with a knife, all right? So someone with a knife where Joe is sitting and where I'm at here, okay, that may be coming towards me, may not be as much of a threat for me because I'm a little quicker than it would be for you, Bill, because you might be slower than me, right? Or, but seriously, like there's a table between us. May not be as much of a threat to me, and therefore, you know, maybe deadly force options aren't necessary with someone coming at me with a knife and I have a taser or pepper spray or whatever the case may be. So it's really, in the past, law enforcement, and Inez, you've used a cop for a very long time,
Thank
but they, back in the day, it's like, you have a knife, I got a gun, this isn't gonna go well. That's kind of how things played out. But now we're really thinking through these scenarios much differently. What's the mental health situation of the person we're dealing with? You know, and so I'm excited, we're rolling this out, and it's gonna be really a new way of looking at use of force.
Not to cut you off, but as they're being trained, as new police officers are being trained, are they learning some of this now about the psychology?
Our entire
How to deal
organization is
with,
going through this.
Okay, so after they're done the academy, I mean, so locally, obviously, you know,
This has not been
getting
done
to
yet.
institute this, but when they get their initial training, kind of being able to judge somebody's mental state, all those types of things, you know,
They get
that's
some,
not ingrained yet in the. I'm saying yet, I don't know if it'll ever be, but
we got a lot of work
Yeah,
to do in our,
yeah.
regional academies and other academies. I will tell you, they graduate from the police academy, come here, we have another 5 to 6 weeks of
Training.
post-academy training because we are putting this into our
right, okay.
trainings because it's important.
But it's all different, I'm sure, from
Every jurisdiction.
even locally, from city to county to Louisa to Waynesboro to, you know, when you start looking at, okay.
Absolutely, absolutely. So some data, so this was in our annual report. Our officers responded to almost 41,000 calls for service last year. Of those, there were only 92 use of force incidents. That's 0.5% of all calls for service. You think about how many interactions our officers have with people each and every day. And you know, thank goodness we haven't had any officer involved shootings. But I can tell you I feel safe saying over 100 interactions with firearms our officers deal with every year. I would argue, say probably hundreds. We're pulling a lot of guns off the street, Joe sees them. We haven't had one officer involved shooting this year. And it's because our officers are thoughtful, we're training them well. We're not perfect. By and large, we are not perfect. But and we have work to do, but I'm really proud of our folks. I watch videos, Joe and I watch videos all the time of our officers with the use of forces and different incidents, and we're just like, man, that was all, because it could have went another way. Joe, anything on? Yeah.
No, it is remarkable to see those numbers, but when you watch an officer, I mean, this was in public, but 3 officers went into his school and there was a kid, he had a loaded handgun in his lap, one around in the chamber. And as they approached, he kind of went for it and started, and they were pros, and for lay people, it brings home what they do every day when they, you know, put the badge and the uniform on. It's just and I think it starts at the top. The culture is like, let's start first with, you know, language and de-escalation, and that's kind of more of a mindset than get out there and start, you know, acting.
That scenario that Joe's talking about, that situation with the young man with the gun, the officers that walked up when he was going and reaching for the gun in the classroom. The first thing the officer said to him when he grabbed his hand, "Hey, bud, I know you're scared. Relax." And was able to eventually get him in handcuffs and recover that gun. And so, you know, that's the caliber of folks I get to work with, and sometimes I'm accused of defending them too much and stuff like that, but I get to see the work they do each and every day. So, but anyway, yeah.
Chief, how does that 0.5% compare to any national or regional?
I don't
data?
know.
I mean, it must be way on the low end, I'm guessing, with that number of calls for service.
Yeah, I think, you know, I'd say it's probably lower than a lot of places, but I don't think you're gonna see much higher numbers across the country. I really don't. I think the challenge is when we don't get it right. It's a big deal. Right? Like I said earlier, our officers are hiring 21-year-old kids, sending them to training for a little bit, for a few months, and we expect them to be perfect, and we should. Because we're giving these kids a badge, a gun, and a tremendous amount of authority, right? And they gotta get it right all the time. So when they don't get it right, it's a big deal. And it should be. And that's what you hear. But I would argue the numbers are probably consistent.
So in order to amass those kind of statistics, you need to be able to document what happened.
Correct.
In other words, so you need incident reports and use of force reports.
Absolutely.
You got a lot of confidence in those reports?
Every one of them.
Okay, is there a good training for people to?
Yeah, so you're talking about our reports that our officers do, and I'm gonna talk about it here right now, kind of what that process is. And so when an officer does a use of force or is involved in a use of force, they have to write a report. Right, it's a use of force report, the body cam footage is downloaded, and it is initially reviewed by their immediate supervisor. That immediate supervisor then reviews it, and it goes up to their supervisor, and then to the next supervisor, all the way to me, to the chain of command. I'm the last part of that piece, right? So everyone reviews it, all the body worn camera footage, anybody who is around, any other officers, all of it is loaded into a system called Axon Standards. All right, and there's different sign-offs or comments at each level of the review process. Now, we will be, and I've talked to Inez about this, is that we're putting together a use of force review committee as part of that process as it comes up. So it would be a committee of folks who sits on that and reviews all these use of forces before they get to me and make recommendations on them. And so, but let me say this, as Joe said earlier, every use of force is an assault. Every one of them. Anytime you put your hand on somebody, that's an assault. If there is an allegation of an excessive use of force, that process, it doesn't start, it goes right to Joe. And Joe will look at it. If it's something is like, okay, well, we need to, and because we have body cam footage, a lot of it, he'll make a determination either then, like basically, or it's like, well, we may need to look into this a little further. And if that's the case, we will task that out to the Virginia State Police to review.
Who can make allegations? And do they have different levels of?
Allegation of excessive force?
Yeah.
Anyone.
Okay.
If you feel like.
And they're all dealt with,
That's an allegation.
dealt with and more or less the same.
Can I add an important point to that,
Yeah.
though? It's not just an individual that feels that they want to make a complaint of excessive use of force. Because, a lot of people might be like, oh yeah, that's gonna go well, like the police are gonna like believe me. So we should acknowledge there's a real impediment to people complaining and having that looked at. So that's a concern, right? Every layer of supervision that the chief talked about that looks at it, every single one of those people, if they have any concern, they call me immediately. So the system is not set up to rely upon the individual who was the recipient of the use of force. The whole review process and command structure at any point in time, and I've received several calls. Someone's like, I don't know, let's just have, and I do it myself personally. It doesn't get farmed out to anyone else. So every step along the way, any one of those individuals having any concern can say, do you think there's something criminal here? And that happens, not a lot, but if my experience has been, if it's even close, most of the time I'm like, that's not even close, but thanks.
But look, so if one of my lieutenants doesn't catch it, then the captain's supposed to get it. They don't get.
Yeah.
By them signing off on it, they're saying, well, they don't, and so there's a significant accountability measures within that process.
And if we have a case we're prosecuting, we see something that was missed, we also can, the lawyers are looking at it for cases that are being charged and prosecuted in court, the prosecutor's office is.
And the Commonwealth Attorney's Office has access to all the videos, so they can review all of them. Officer involved shootings and in custody deaths, all of them will be referred out to Virginia State Police for investigation. We do not investigate our own.
Question going back real quick, Chief.
Yes.
You said anytime an officer puts their hands on somebody, it's automatically an assault at that moment, right?
Well, it's it, under the law, like
Under the
when
law.
you, when one person touches another person, you can
It's
say, well, that's an
automatic.
assault and battery every time you touch someone, so.
So if somebody, let's say I have let's say you're a police officer and I have a knife and I'm coming after you first, or I have a gun. If I'm the attacker on you, I start the fight and you have to defend yourself. Is it still an assault?
No.
But if that officer,
So-
but if that officer shoots and kills someone, still homicide. The question then is justifiable homicide? Or is it, you see what I mean? It could be.
Yeah, it's kind of
self-defense or-
case specific,
yeah.
but
Okay,
if you're
yeah.
attacked, an officer is
Yeah.
able to,
Like if a guy's coming out of a bar and he's 6'5", 280, and he's swinging around and everything, and the police have to grab him to hold him, at that moment, that's an assault on the police? Cause that doesn't make any sense to me.
no, what we're trying to say is, under the law,
Yeah, yeah.
an assault and battery is, it's an offensive touching. So
Okay.
we're trying to say, every time an officer's touching someone, under the law, that's I mean,
Okay.
so, but then it's like, okay, are they privileged to use that force? And almost 100% of the time, drunken public, disorderly conduct, assault and battery, they're privileged to go hands-on, and then is it reasonable?
Okay, so that's.
So we're just trying to point out that every time there's a touching.
Yeah.
You've gotta start with, were you privileged
You
to
gotta go
engage?
through the process.
Right.
Right, ask the questions, okay. what
Right,
is-
they
what is
can't
it?
just go grab people
Yeah.
out and about, they've gotta have a privilege
Right,
under the law for why they're doing it.
And then one thing that I think is important to understand is that an administrative investigation does not and cannot occur until the criminal investigation is completed. Now, that's not by law, you can do tandem investigations. It is not a good practice because administrative investigations, you're talking about compelled statements under Garrity that cannot be used in a criminal court. So it's almost always a best practice that the criminal investigation works its way through the courts, and then an administrative investigation can occur. But for us, it's also a little different within the collective bargaining agreement. Collective bargaining dictates we shall not do an administrative investigation until the criminal investigation is completed and goes through the courts. If there's a criminal investigation associated with it. Any questions on me? Okay, this kind of talks about what we've already spoken about. Few things I do want to talk about that we have kind of going on right now. We're talking about data. One question that I've really wanted to know is what, do we have disparities when it comes to use of force within our system? I suspect we do. So the question is why? I think it's a complex question, and I think the answer is going to be a multitude of reasons. And so, but the Center for Policing Equity is currently reviewing all our uses of force. As you saw, there's very few. But they're gonna go back several years to look and kind of tell us, and then they're gonna make some recommendations. And so I'm really excited about that. We're also partnering with the Justice Department, their COPS office. They're doing an organizational assessment that's underway as well right now. And what that's going to do is kind of look at our processes and procedures and see where we can maybe do better, making sure we have best practices, make sure we're doing all the things that we need to do. So those two studies are happening as we speak. It's gonna take a little while, probably close to 6 months to get that done. There's a lot of data involved and all that, but that's happening now. The folks from the Justice Department doing an organizational assessment. They'll be in town here in a few weeks, doing that piece as well, so. Questions? Oh, wait, Joe, do you have anything else?
No, I thought that was an excellent PowerPoint.
General question
You
about
had a
the
question.
continuum of
Yes.
uses of force, chief, and some of us recently watched the Frontline on postural asphyxia.
Positional asphyxia.
Thank you, positional asphyxia.
Yeah.
And I think I know the answer to this, but they talked about the dangers of that, and I just want to know, is that built into your continuum, and did you just address that question?
It is, that's actually trained in the academy. And it's something that our profession has been looking at for a long time now. And for a while, way back in the day, we used to do, I don't know the correct term for it, some call it hog tying or whatever, that that causes positional asphyxia. I mean, and so, so yes, our officers are trained, especially if they have somebody on the ground and their face is down, the first thing they do, once they cuff them, turn them up and sit them up. And I've seen that in body cam footage after body cam footage of our folks. It's the first thing they do. So, yeah, that's a good question.
Senior use of force guidance too, so.
There you go.
Good for you. Anyone else? I've got a question, I think for Mr. Platania. That we talk about Graham versus Connor as establishing a standard of constitutional justification for the use of force, but you know, Mr. Graham came out of that with a broken ankle and a contused head and spent a month in the hospital. Has there been any jurisprudence in Virginia or nationally that has kind of made Graham versus Connor a little stronger or narrower or dealt with, you know, what is the justification, you know, what is justification? I mean,
Yeah, so several years ago, I actually prosecuted a Charlottesville police officer for assault and battery. It was something the police department caught and brought to me. And I felt I didn't feel he had any privilege to go hands-on with this person. And I felt even if he did, it was excessive. And I started calling really smart people to say, I can't find anything. Like, how do I even prosecute this case? And so I found very little out there. I called one of the chief's prior colleagues, Brian Porter, the elected Commonwealth's attorney in Alexandria, who's a super smart guy. Their office was doing one. Talked to Chief Longo, who teaches this and testifies across the country. I found there very little guidance. And so you just have to be able to kind of boil it down to, do you have privilege and was the force reasonable? And so there weren't a lot of case law in Virginia on it. And you know why? It's because so seldom do these prosecutions happen. There's just not like a body of law on it.
Just a point of information, isn't it also true that whereas sometimes the law doesn't provide a legal remedy for that, inevitably, if there's a policy violation regarding that use of force, that you can still terminate the officer's employment, though you cannot prosecute him criminally?
Oh,
That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
There could be things that may not rise to a crime, but it is a violation of policy. And so, so yes,
And there's
absolutely.
also
They're two
the civil-
very different things.
And then the civil remedies associated
And
with that
there's
assault.
civil remedies too. You know, that's one thing that, you know, when you talk about qualified, the whole conversation around qualified immunity, it's qualified immunity, right? So there's, I mean, officers can't just do anything.
Yeah, and you don't want a culture where officers feel like, oh, the prosecutor is just looking to get me for doing my job. But you also want a culture where they know that very clearly they will be held responsible by their command staff and their chief and the prosecutor's office. But again, you have to create, in my opinion, a culture where the police department, I mean, we work together all the time. They have to feel like we don't work for them and they don't work for us, but there has to be a level of mutual trust and respect there. So, you know, it's not like you're going out looking for these cases to just, you know, make a point. It's got to be conduct that you truly feel is criminal that you can prove beyond a reasonable doubt.
And these are very you know, I haven't been on the street in a while, right? I mean, but when I watch the body cam footage of these cases I mean, they're complex. They really are. And that's why the courts have said it's really what was in the eyes of the officer at the time based on their information that they had at that time. Jeff, you went to the Citizens Academy where you all did scenarios, right? I promise I won't show the video, but like it's very difficult.
And boy, it drove the point home to me. I mean, it's
They're making split-second decisions.
with challenging customers.
People, I mean.
You know, they got mental health issues,
Yes,
they're
there's a lot going on.
intoxicated, they're enraged, you know, they've just been, you know, they're involved in a domestic. I mean, it's just endless.
one thing, there are no other questions.
I think there's two.
Yeah, I did,
Oh,
I did.
okay.
I'm sorry, I interrupted. Oh,
Oh, go ahead. You were first, yeah.
oh, yeah. So I get, it's not a question, it's more of a statement or understanding how difficult it is. Not only if an officer makes a mistake, but they have to feel like they have to be honest about the mistake.
Oh.
And that's the thing that I am concerned with in you know, when I worked in, you know, criminal justice stuff, is that people want to cover their, you know, whaties. And so that's really where the, oh, I don't know, the community helps, the, you know, I mean, you know, what you do, how the administration supports, you know, to do that balance. Because that's the thing that you know, that I've seen that really doesn't, it's problematic.
Body cam, Susan, are
Well,
really.
there's that, and there's a lot, I mean, there's cameras everywhere, but here. Our internal affairs investigations are very thorough. And if someone lies, I will say this right now, if someone lies and they have a sustained complaint for untruthfulness, it's automatic termination. And I shall, by state code, submit decertification paperwork within 48 hours. And I have done it.
Mhm.
So without getting into details, I've done that since I've been here.
But they have to feel safe that they can tell the truth as
And
well.
they have to feel safe that they can tell the truth, exactly, so there's, you know, there are, you know. Their job, is like we talked about, is very complicated, these use of force cases are very complicated. And you're right, they have to feel like they can tell the truth, and that's why Garrity exists, right, because these are compelled statements, because it's a condition of their employment that they have to tell. They can't say, so in an administrative investigation, I'm not talking, I'm
Yeah,
not
right,
saying,
right.
they don't have that right.
Right.
Now, the reason, so because they don't have that right, what they say in there can't be sent to Joe. That's why the two investigations are very different. But they can lose their job and their career.
So the other quick question is any of these brought up with the restorative justice?
We have talked with the restorative justice people, and very early on, the chief was like, oh, in the right case, you said you were very
Yeah.
supportive of that.
Yeah.
One quick point, I just was in the media talking about a murder case where there were 12 eyewitnesses. The police did an amazing job, and the 12 eyewitnesses were just like, we're not coming to court, we're not saying anything, we're not gonna cooperate, and so it resulted in a manslaughter conviction. So the culture on the streets around these individuals involved in an altercation with each other, the culture is, I'm not snitching, I'm not whatever, and it's like, well, you're actually not even gonna come testify about who you saw kill your friend. That same culture can be created within a department where the culture is, you don't tolerate that, you will be ostracized if you do that, and we do not have your back for that sort of stuff. And then one other point is you can read nationally about like police departments that have these do not call lists. And it's very controversial, like, oh, the prosecutor isn't gonna turn over the Brady do not call list with all the officers that they can't call. And these really reform-minded progressive prosecutors, like, we're gonna turn over all the officers who can't testify, they're on the Brady list and the do not call list. And that's like this big reform. Well, in
Could
Charlottesville.
you explain what Brady list?
Yeah, sorry. If there's an officer that a prosecutor says, I can't call them as a witness because they're just not truthful. So it's a do not call list. And so a lot of prosecutors' offices, many in Virginia, have lists of officers that can't be called to testify because the prosecutor's like, I deem them untruthful. But that's a hidden private list. And so a lot of prosecutors are like, well, I'm gonna be bold and progressive and reform-minded and release the list. Well, in Charlottesville, we've never had one because the chief fires anyone that would ever be on that list. The list doesn't exist in Charlottesville. And he just said one instance of being untruthful, you're just not a Charlottesville cop. So I don't have some list to turn over because it doesn't exist.
It's really wild, yeah.
And that's an important thing to me that I think people sometimes miss. It's like, that's the culture that's created and is here.
People make mistakes,
Yeah.
sometimes big mistakes.
Right.
But you can't lie on this job.
So Anna, did you have a?
Yes, I
Question?
have a few questions about the numbers and I don't know if you know the answers, but I'm so curious.
I'll try.
So out of almost 41,000, what calls are included in those calls?
Every call,
So the
anything that
wellness
came from
check,
dispatch,
so
so
the wellness check, help me buy the diapers, everything?
name it, domestics, 911 hangups,
Okay,
assaults, shootings, to, what was the thing you said about diapers? I didn't get that. But yes, that's every call.
Coyote in my backyard. Yeah.
yeah,
And it's interesting, it's a good question because most interactions between police and the community don't require use of force.
mhm,
Most of what we deal with each and every day are folks either going through some type of crisis or something else, but it doesn't rise to that level, so.
And the 92 cases, they're reported by who? So is it the ones that were reported to you or also by civilians?
All use force, so that's every time I was explaining how if there's a use of force
Yeah.
by an officer, they have to do a report. And so that report, though, that's how many of those reports were done.
That's self-reported, okay. What about the use of force that involved no calls?
That involves what?
No calls, something else on the street?
It would be a call, even if it was an officer, like a self-initiated call, like an officer
Okay.
doing a traffic stop or something, that still comes in. But that would count.
And what's included in the use of force in these cases?
It could be anything from grabbing somebody by the wrist and handcuffing them, someone just pulling away and then handcuffing them, to a taser, to pepper spray. I can't remember the last time I saw anybody use a baton. I don't think we've had any of them in a long time. Yeah, lots of different things. Most of them are hands-on type of stuff.
Okay, those are all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I guess I'll kind of say something that's kind of swirling through my brain. So I've been in Charlottesville a long time. And I remember when I was in my 20s, which was a long time ago,
Not that.
when
Not that.
many moons ago. But, and you may have been working here then, I'm not sure. But that was during that time when they were doing these DNA swabs on
Yes.
black men, right?
Yes.
That were my age.
Yep.
So I had several friends, believe it or not, in this town. One guy that was eating lunch with his coworkers, worked at SNL Securities right here. I think it's called something global now, right? Sitting out there with his coworkers. And this isn't under your administration, but
One more time, but I know everything,
right,
I know all
right. I've
about it.
heard all these stories, but you know, it's so the police came up and asked them, you know, please come with us. Let's get a sample of your DNA. And I knew this had happened to several people. One of the things that drove me to being on this board 4 years ago now. And I'm not saying that is definitely going on today, but it's such a sick reality. And I don't know if that, you know, that's not use of physical force, but you're taking somebody, you know, DNA, these men were humiliated oftentimes in front of people. It didn't matter where they were. You could be sitting right here in this environment. So I'm hoping that doesn't go on anywhere today. You know, it's really crazy and sick. I don't know how something like that would weigh out in these scenarios. I mean, you're not physically putting your hands on somebody, but you're intimidating someone, right? And then you're saying, hey, can I get a little swab? You know, and I don't know where that would fit within this or it's too far out.
So I will tell you, we
but,
talk about
yeah.
consensual encounters,
Right.
right? But a consensual encounter can turn into a investigative detention very easily just by the officer's presence. Or if I come up and talk to you and say, whatever, and then there's 3 fellow officers standing around you and we have guns and in uniform, the courts have said, well, that could turn into an investigative detention very quickly, which is not justified. Right? So there's a lot of things that come into play. Joe, am I right on that?
Yeah, and I think, you know, one of the things when you look at like the continuum in use of force, a uniformed officer's presence is a use of force. Just
It's
that.
intimidating for a lot of
Could
folks.
be,
that are not.
yeah.
No, what I'm saying is like just when a uniformed
Yeah.
officer is present, the temperature changes a little bit.
Right.
What I'm trying to do is acknowledge what you're talking about something far more than that,
It's
but.
different, but it's here, it's in our culture, it's
Right,
Charlottesville.
Right, and
Yeah.
so I would suggest, and I think the chief would agree, the department lean into when you show up, you're in uniform and people are gonna, you know.
Yeah.
That's why when we were walking around Greenstone and Fifth yesterday and a uniformed officer was running foot races with a kid and riding on a bike is to try and sort of say, let's not always have an officer showing up, something's bad, something's wrong, someone's in trouble. Let's have them do foot races and kick a soccer ball and
Right.
help unload the groceries from the car. So that's the
Those are
work
things we do.
that's the work
Yeah.
that's being done and it takes time and continuing to show up. And so I respectfully, I mean, I don't have words about that time in the city.
I knew a guy, just to keep going on for one more minute, a guy that went to a restaurant, right? Right on the UVA corner, comes out, jumps in a cab, and the cab dropped him off at the police station. And, you know, I just feel for him, you know, years and years later.
Yeah, a lot of people's lives were impacted.
Yeah, so pretty sick stuff. back in those days. But no, and I do appreciate the community walks, and I would love to join. I'm so busy right at that time, you know, because I've been wanting to go on almost all of them.
They're amazing.
Yeah,
They're great.
but right at that time, you know, I got everybody coming home from school, and so, is that normally Wednesday or Thursday or one of the other?
Push it out, usually Wednesday or Thursdays. We did one yesterday, with the school board.
Okay.
And, we're doing one next week as well. But yeah, we get those conversations, we started doing that just to kind of learn, so I kind of learned the community and.
Yeah.
And I've said this, I just started hearing something very different than what you hear on other venues.
Yeah.
And, there are very few communities that are affected by gun violence that want less police. I hear that all the time. What I do hear is that they want good policing. They want procedurally just policing. I mean, we put an officer down here on the mall, and then I was up in West, we did a community walk in West Haven, they're like, how come we can't have an officer? Assigned to that neighborhood, so I don't have enough police officers, right? But, you know, it's just making sure that we're out there engaging with the community in the right way.
Right, yeah, and I personally see that happening,
We're trying to.
but you know, those are the things that you're trying to overcome, as you know.
It takes
You
time.
know, it's.
Trust wasn't lost
Yeah.
overnight,
Right,
so it's not gonna be rebuilt overnight.
right.
It reminds me, I moved down from Newark. I was a probation officer there. I went to criminal justice school there. And it was, you know, I was in the mid-90s where community policing. And this is, God love me because I'm naive, but I've been like on the streets and everything, but I'm still naive. It took me 5 years to realize, you mean the police are not playing basketball with the kids? I mean, I watched for like years, you know, hoping to see that. So thank you for doing it. 'Cause
Well,
I
we
was
do
like,
it now, but man, I can't walk the next day.
Yeah.
It's, wears me out.
So thank you, because it's like,
Well, thank you all.
So, just a second, Keisha, do you have any
Oh, sorry.
questions or? Are you okay? You're good? So it sounds like looks like she.
well, I always wave to the person. I can't see.
Yeah.
me.
I'm good and I can see you.
All right, okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you
Well,
so much.
very much.
Oh,
Very good.
I'm here with Sam, Sam.
I didn't know you were from New Jersey. You sit next to
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
Let
Oh,
us, let us, is there any objection to
So,
adjournment?
Can,
Do we have anybody in?
Sam,
No public
here,
comment?
Sam,
Oh,
he-
yeah.
No public comment?
we really want
We
to
have
be
to go to
here. and
public
he's
comment.
not here.
talked to Sam.
Anybody in the?
Okay.
Nobody likes us, I mean, so
There
boring
anybody
now,
else?
nobody cares anymore.
That's what I thought.
Oh, she raised her hand.
Yeah, so, you know, yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Can we do our public comment here?
I gotta run.
Your,
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
okay, you're on with the board?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I sent you all an email about things that have happened in the past and some things. And I never heard any follow-up or whether or not the PCOB is going to be following up about it. So the first one I had on my email was, I would like to know what part and CPD played in the events at the University of Virginia. I understand they were there, and I know they weren't with I mean, I never saw a picture or anybody say that they were with doing things the same way the state was. But I wondered if they had any influence on the invitation to the bringing the state police in. So that was one thing, whether or not that's a role you all think you have, is to find that out. And the other one was that man who was, I have the article in front of me. You remember Patrick McNamara? He was arrested for assaulting someone on the Rivanna Trail, and then the charges were dropped because the description didn't match him and there was video of somebody else. So I just wondered if the PCOB had any follow-up with the police department about how that happened or what they might change in order for when to not happen again. So, and then the third one was, I live in the Greenbrier neighborhood, and And I wasn't able to go to the Greenbrier Neighborhood Association, but I sent you the link to their Zoom meeting. And one of the things that the chief said was in relation to Project Safe Neighborhoods, that it was, you know, he was promoting this. And then he said the words, we will remove you from this community. So he's bringing 20 people in who are repeat offenders, apparently, to talk about them about, he's gonna talk to them about what they need. And presumably if they don't follow up and don't behave, and I don't know what he means by remove them from the community. I'm assuming he will jail them or have them jailed, or I don't know. It seems like a threatening kind of statement, which I wouldn't want to come see him if he said something like that to me. And then the anchor program, I think that the CPD is working pretty hard with the Department of Social Services, I think it is, or Human Services, to plan for that rollout and be in paired teams or joined teams or something like that. But my biggest concern is, you know, what he thinks the Safe Neighborhood program is. I don't know what it is. And also the participation in the events at UVA and the the arrest with false information or inaccurate information or whatever. So anyway, I don't know if I missed something or if it's on your agenda. Those things are on your agenda in the future.
Yeah, well, we don't have, you know, we have no input nor knowledge of what went on at UVA. I know nothing more than I heard on the WYNA, some of the talk shows. So you can go there and, you know, learn as much as we know.
But so that you understand jurisdictionally, it's Chief Longo's call. So any law enforcement agency outside of the UVA Police Department that responded to assist them in any way, shape, or form with the protests involving the students would have been the chief's call, Chief Longo's call.
So I would like to know if what Chief Longo asked the CPD to do or not do.
And that's a question you should probably direct to Chief Longo.
Okay, so you don't feel like that's part of the oversight?
We can't control Chief Longo. It's outside of our jurisdiction.
But
So
overseeing what the result of whatever request it was. Okay, I hear you.
Yeah, I could.
What about the charges being dropped and how, I mean, I would kind of like to know how that process won't happen again. Like what kind of policies are they changing or what kind of policies were
Mr. McNamara.
failed?
Mr. McNamara never contacted us.
I have
So we have no
knowledge of that case whatsoever.
no knowledge.
Uh-huh.
So
Well, that's it. So he could have contacted you guys with it. I'm just following up. He could have say, look into this and
We can't get records of
Yeah.
anything.
he could have, and when we get records, we
okay.
could have
Vast.
It was my understanding that the Police Civilian Review Board, if they thought there was an incident that needed investigation, could do it without, or could do a preliminary or do something without a particular request.
So two things. The answer is yes, you're absolutely correct. If we're aware of it, it has to be brought to our attention. I don't automatically have knowledge of everything that occurs in the city. So that would have to have been brought to my attention. Issue number two, as is the case right now, because we don't currently have a standard operating procedure between ourselves and the police department, even if the complaint had come to me, I would be forced to direct that complaint to internal affairs to be investigated for me to follow up on later when the SOP is finalized. But what I'm saying to you is I couldn't even ask or make an inquiry because I didn't know anything about it. So, so if somebody wants to make an official complaint concerning that matter, then please make it an official complaint so that I have something to go on.
So if I want you all to do that, I can make a complaint.
Absolutely. Anybody can make a complaint. Give me enough information so we can look at it. But what I'm telling you is that right now, because we have an SOP, I'm still going to have to take your complaint and officially forward it to the police department's internal affairs division so that they can investigate it, because we cannot right now.
Okay,
And as far as these two programs are concerned, I haven't heard or seen the video. I will make a point to do that and I will get back to you shortly.
thank you. Thank you all, and I don't know if you all introduced yourselves in the beginning of the meeting, because I think there's some new people came on or something.
Can you see us?
I can. I don't know who the woman is next to Mr. Fletcher.
My name is Cameron McBride. I am a new member and I am an at-large member of the board.
Hello.
And,
Thank you.
and everyone else, do you know Keisha, who is on?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, Keisha.
Yeah. And then Al's new, right? He's not here, but I
Alpola, yes,
Citizens Academy.
Alpola is at the Citizens Academy.
think I have.
And when is your all's, a bunch of you are terms end in August?
That is correct.
Jeff, when is your term in? You got a little while, right? And then,
I was just.
So, does that mean August is your last time, or?
I think I'm the only one. I think.
Well, it's an unclear situation because under our ordinance, if there are no other volunteers, it is possible for individuals to serve a certain amount of time as holdover members.
I see.
So I don't know exactly when I, for example, am going off board.
Thank you.
All right, Miss Fraley, you need to sign up.
No.
Come on in.
I would, but I'm a Albemarle person, so.
Any more
That's your
questions from?
Thank you for answering my questions.
Any more questions in the room here?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right. Are there any objections to a motion to adjourn?
None.
None. In that case, we are adjourned at
Holy moly.
44.
44.
All right.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Good job.